Salibonani, Mabuyane, Nyalamgela with the Girls Table podcast, and I am your host, Bekezela Mguni. So, namhlanje good podcast yethu we are talking about policies and legislations put in place to combat corruption in Zimbabwe, and we would want to understand what role can young women play in combating corruption. Joining me for this conversation is Ruvimbo Muskwe, a media researcher and an advocate for gender equality. Ruvimbo has worked for Transparency International Zimbabwe and is now with Media Monitors. To start with the conversation, Ruvimbo, please explain to us the policies and legislations that have been put in place to combat corruption in Zimbabwe.
Thank you, Becky, for inviting me to such a discussion. It's always important to have young people having such discussions to try and find ways of how youth can take part in the fight against corruption, and also even having youth being part of promoting good governance in our country. It is pertinent. So to begin with, I'll start by responding to your first question on policies and legislations that are put in place to combat corruption in Zimbabwe. So in Zimbabwe, we have several policies and legislations that have been put in place to combat corruption. And so I'll begin by highlighting that we have 3 or 4 institutions that have been set aside to to try and promote transparency and accountability in Zimbabwe. The first one is the Zimbabwe Anti-Corruption Commission, which is an independent board established under the Zimbabwe Anti-Corruption Commission Act, and it is responsible for investigating and preventing corruption, as well as raising public awareness about corruption-related issues. And then ZACC itself has the authority to arrest, investigate individuals involved in corruption crimes. And then we have the Financial Intelligence Unit, which is responsible for combating money laundering and terrorist financing. It also collects, analyzes, and disseminates financial intelligence to relevant authorities, helping to detect and investigate corruption related financial transactions. Then we also have institutions like ZACC, which has the power to arrest, and also NPA, which has the prosecuting powers in Zimbabwe. Then we move on to the policies and legislations that we have in Zimbabwe. I'll focus mainly on 3 acts and then talk of the National Anti-Corruption Strategy. So the first one is the Prevention of Corruption Act, which criminalizes various forms of corruption, including bribery, abuse of office, money laundering, and illicit enrichment. So this act establishes penalties for offenders and provides mechanisms for reporting and investigating corruption cases. And then we have the Public Procurement and Disposal of Public Assets Act, which is the legislation which aims to ensure transparency, fairness, and accountability in public procurement processes. This act establishes procedures for tendering, bidding, and awarding contracts with the goal of reducing corruption risk and promoting efficient use of public resources. And then lastly, we have the one that almost everyone knows, which is Section 174 of the Criminal Law and Codification Act, which criminalizes the abuse of office. Those are the legislations or pieces of legislation that we have in Zimbabwe to try and fight against corruption. Then we have the National Anti-Corruption Strategy. Sorry, I'm down with the flu, which was developed by our government, which is a comprehensive anti-corruption strategy which outlines the country's approach to combating corruption. This strategy includes measures such as promoting transparency and accountability, strengthening law enforcement agencies, and enhancing public awareness and education on corruption-related issues. And one thing I like about the National Anti-Corruption Strategy is it understands that there is need for a holistic approach in the fight against corruption.
Thank you so much, Ruvimbo. That was insightful and informative. I hope people will learn from this conversation. But please explain to us how effective are these policies and what else can be done to enhance the effectiveness of anti-corruption measures.
So, to enhance the effectiveness of anti-corruption measures, there is need for a robust and impartial judicial system that expeditiously handles corruption cases and ensures the accountability of perpetrators. And also, they might need to strengthen these institutions that we have, institutions like ZACC, institutions like NPA, because the effectiveness of ZACC has been questioned in the past due to allegations of political interference and insufficient resources. And in the number of platforms, we have seen that ZACC would say they only have investigating powers, they don't have powers to prosecute. And also, NPA, on the other hand, will be talking about lack of evidence. So, I think there is need for some collaboration between these two institutions to ensure that there's an effective implementation of these policies. And there is also need to strengthen the independence of ZACC and to strengthen even their capacity and effectiveness, because it is crucial for enhancing its impact as an institution. And also, we need whistleblower protection mechanisms because they are essential for encouraging the reporting of corruption. There is no way there will be prosecution or even investigation of a case without it being reported. So whistleblowers are crucial because there have been concerns about the effectiveness of whistleblower protection in Zimbabwe, including the lack of adequate safeguards and insufficient awareness among potential whistleblowers. So there's need to strengthen legal protections to ensure confidentiality and providing support and incentives for whistleblowers, which might be crucial to fight against corruption, because one will question if my identity will be protected if I report, or even how safe am I as a whistleblower in Zimbabwe, looking at what has been happening with even journalists themselves when they expose some of these things, their safety is not really guaranteed. So we might need a whistleblower protection mechanism that is effective and efficient to ensure that there is trust from citizens for them to come out and report corruption.
I'm a young woman and I work with young women, so I would want to understand Uguti, what are the socio-economic and political impacts of corruption on us as young women?
There's need to increase public awareness about the detrimental effects of corruption and to promote ethical values from people in communities, because if you are to ask a citizen or a general person in the street of what they understand about corruption or even the effects of corruption, for them corruption has become so normal and it's now a way of living, because for one to get a passport it means you need to pay something. Even for one to pass through a roadblock you need to pay something. And instances of nepotism and sextortion for one to get a service. So there's need for public awareness and education, and there's need to strengthen anti-corruption education and awareness campaigns, particularly targeting the younger generation, which might be beneficial.
I thank you so much, Rubimbo. But well, as a young woman, I would want to understand what role can we play in combating corruption and making sure what we promote good governance.
Corruption has far-reaching socio-economic and political impacts on young women. It undermines their access to basic services such as education, healthcare, and employment opportunities, and it perpetuates inequality and hinders their overall development as young people. And corruption also erodes trust in public institutions and weakens the rule of law, and creates an environment where young women face increased vulnerability to various forms of exploitation and discrimination. We might well need to talk about sextortion, which is something that affects young women a lot, for them to access services. We've had a number of cases where women have been exploited for them to access services such as even water. So, and corruption diverts public funds away from essential services such as education, healthcare, and infrastructure. So, young women may face limited access to quality education, making it harder for them to acquire skills and pursue economic opportunities. And corruption perpetuates gender inequalities by reinforcing discriminatory practices where young women may face additional barriers and discrimination when accessing public services or seeking employment due to corrupt practices such as bribery or nepotism in most cases, and they become victims of sextortion. So when I say sextortion, it is a situation where sex is now being used as a currency, or sex is now being used for one to get services. And young women usually are the ones who are victims to such. And also, corruption undermines democratic processes and institutions, eroding trust in the political system. Young women may find it more challenging to participate in politics and decision-making processes, leading to a lack of representation and influence over policies that affects them.
I believe we learned a lot from this conversation. I hope even everyone who's going to listen to this conversation bazananzelela ukuqakatheka kokuthi lawe noma mbani abe yingxenye in making sure that we promote good governance, we combat corruption in our country. Thank you so much for listening until the end of our podcast. Please don't forget to follow us on our social media pages. It's the Girls Table. Go Facebook, Instagram, the.girls table. Do also follow us on Twitter for more conversations on issues that affect young women. Twitter handle it's table_girls. From me, your host, Bekezela Mguni, and thank you so much, Ruvimbo. Until next time.